very much. Let's get some more on all of this. Joining us now, one of Donald Trump's key supporters, Scottie Nell Hughes. Scottie, thanks very much for joining us.
Happy Friday, Wolf.
Thank you. A day after saying he'd endorse Donald Trump, vote for Donald Trump, the House Speaker Paul Ryan now says he completely disagreed with Donald Trump's attacks on this federal judge in California, Gonzalo Curiel. Trump had the opportunity to clean all of this up today in that interview with Jake, but he doubled down in going after this federal judge. Is that a mistake?
Well, let's look at it. First of all, just because Paul Ryan says that he disagreed with one of the steps that Mr. Trump has taken doesn't mean that he is disavowing his entire presidency. Yesterday, he was very smart. It was great to have the speaker endorse Mr. Trump. And might I point out, it was at the beginning of Hillary Clinton's speech. And if you looked on social media at the time, that was getting just as much attention as some of Hillary Clinton's lines that she was delivering in her speech. And if you look at everything that has happened in the last 24 hours, sure, people like Mitch McConnell, people like Speaker Ryan, might not like certain parts of Mr. Trump, and they'll probably continue not to like certain parts, but the end result is they're still going to vote for him. They're still going to support him. And that is something that is very important to Mr. Trump. He doesn't pander to politicians, Wolf. He panders to the people.
But, Scottie, do you support these attacks by Donald Trump on this federal judge, saying he is not fair, he is not he is biased because of his, quote, Mexican heritage?
Well, I think that the judge is biased. He is a judge that was appointed by President Obama, and he's been very sporadic in regards to this case. He sat there and unsealed documents, then sealed them, then unsealed them again. And you want to sit there and look at bias. He does sit. He is a part of a Hispanic Lawyers Council that might be separate from the more radical group. However, he has actually been awarded scholarships to illegal citizens here in the United States. So he definitely has some sort of sympathy for illegals that are here in this country. So there has to be some sort of bias. I would possibly use different phrasing than Mr. Trump. But once again, this is another type of mudslinging that's being thrown at Mr. Trump that's not necessarily all clear. You have issues like the actual prosecutors in the
Scottie,
case took 600.
You can disagree with some of his rulings in the case without calling into question his motive because of his Mexican heritage.
Well, you have to wonder if necessarily when you look at it that this is all politically motivated, and why is this all coming out right now when you're down to basically the front runner of the Democratic Party versus the Republican? You cannot deny that the timing of this is nothing but political. And when you're looking at the prosecutor in this case, and by the way, the Attorney General, who is also a Democrat, the prosecutors in this case, that law firm taking, I think it's about $675,000 they paid to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton as recently for speeches in 2014. You have to look at this as a whole context that this is politically motivated, and if we were not in an election year with him being a Republican, we would not probably even have this in any of our headlines.
Why didn't Donald Trump's lawyers then, if he feels this judge is not fair, why didn't they ask that he recuse himself or remove himself from this case? Legally, they never did that.
I think that would have been a very smart decision. I think that maybe might have been an error, in my own personal opinion, of Mr. Trump's lawyers, but for some reason they didn't, and so now we're going to continue to have this fight. The question, Wolf, is, as we're sitting here talking about the, Trump University and whether or not it's a scam, and obviously if you sit there and you look at it, you have people on both sides of the issue. Some think it's great, some think it was legitimate, some think it's not. You have to, and I think this is why Mr. Trump is bringing up all of the email controversy with the Clinton Global Initiative, and you're sitting going, if you're going to sit here and you're going to scrutinize Trump University, a for-profit private citizen organization, versus a government entity that was taking more than $40 million from foreign governments while Ms. Clinton was Secretary of State.
Second. Scottie,
you need to apply to both.
What's the government entity you're talking about?
Well, you're looking at, it's $20 million that were taken from governments that involved it, whether it was giving a speech that was
money going to the Clinton Global Initiative.
Going to the Clinton Global Initiative.
All right, stand by, Scottie. Stand by, Scottie. We're going to continue this conversation. We have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Get back to the breaking news. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, they're continuing their bitter slugfest, and they have been doing it right here on CNN. Both candidates sat down today with CNN's Jake Tapper for exclusive interviews. Clinton was asked about some of the stunning scenes of violence outside those Donald Trump rallies.
I condemn all violence in our political arena. I condemned it when Donald Trump was inciting it and congratulating people who were engaging in it. I condemn it by those who are taking violent protests to physical assault against Donald Trump. This has to end. He set a very bad example. He created an environment in which it seemed to be acceptable for someone running for president to be inciting violence, to be encouraging his supporters. Now we're seeing people who are against him responding in kind. It should all stop. It is not acceptable.
At the end of the day, do you think that those violent anti-Trump protesters actually might be helping him in a way by showing his opposition in such a horrendous light?
I don't think any of this helps anybody. I don't think his protests that were led by his supporters, beating up people who were peacefully protesting against Trump, helped Trump. And I don't think that people who are protesting and using physical violence against people supporting Trump are helping anybody. So I want it to just end, Jake. I don't want to parse it. I don't want to talk about the political implications. I want it to end. The police have a hard enough job trying to make sure that we're able to gather and talk about the issues facing our country. And Trump has lowered the bar. And now, is it a surprise that people who don't like him are stepping over that low bar? I don't think it is. He needs to condemn all violence by everyone. I already have. I will continue to do so.
We're back with Donald Trump supporter Scottie, Nell, Hughes. Scottie, is Hillary Clinton right? Did Donald Trump set the stage for at least some of the violence we're now seeing?
Absolutely not. Now, I will give her this. Thank you for Hillary Clinton for actually coming out and saying that you condoned the violence. But now let's keep
no, she
that
said
conversation going.
She condemned
she condemns the violence, and she does not believe that it needs to be happening. Thank you for saying that. I think that's something that Bernie Sanders, as well as all leadership on both sides of the aisles, need to talk about. Here's something interesting, though, as I watch the footage of these protests outside. There's one thing that I find to be funny. These are mainly young protesters. These are people that are in their 20s or their 30s, most of them of Hispanic background, as we're in California and New Mexico, which makes me wonder, because you don't see a lot of middle-aged people out there protesting. You don't see those that are out there that, maybe are in their 40s or the 50s that came over here from Mexico, that remember what it's like to be under an oppressed, corrupt government, like what we have in Mexico today, where the minimum wage is $4, which is what somebody who gets right out of school all the way up until the day they retire, unless you're in elected office. So I find it very interesting. So while we're sitting here and we're talking about, I'm one of those that don't believe that have not given up on Hispanics voting for Mr. Trump. When you look along those border counties around Texas, Mr. Trump did very well in those with a lot of Hispanics. In fact, yesterday I read a story of a former sheriff along the border who is Hispanic, who said that he supported Mr. Trump.
Scottie, I assume you agree with Hillary Clinton that Donald Trump, like her, should condemn all of this kind of violence at these rallies, at these meetings.
Absolutely, and he has. He does every single time. You have to look at this, Wolf. Inside Mr. Trump's rallies, it is peaceful. There was only one example of a person who was punched out by a Trump supporter, and that was after that person had been flicking off, been vulgar, had been spitting on people around him. After that, there has been no other violence within, and it's definitely not come at the source of the Trump supporters. It's always the Trump protesters that are attacking police, that are destroying property, that, as we saw yesterday, a mob assaulted a woman, absolutely threw eggs at her, spit on her, where, you know what? She had a smile on her face, but I know she was scared. You saw yesterday people in polo shirts and khaki pants leaving with blood pouring from their heads, being assaulted by these folks as they burned the American flag. That is an insult to every American, regardless of what party you belong to.
All right, Scottie, Hughes, thanks very much for joining us.